What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And as always, we have ourselves a busy show as we have a lot of volleyball to get into, such as Ohio State women's volleyball. They took down number 4 Nebraska, and they also took down Purdue, as they are tied atop the Big Ten Conference with Wisconsin. Also, we had a lot of reverse sweeps happening, mainly in the Pac-12, as Stanford reverse swept USC, UCLA reverse swept Cal, Oregon reverse swept Colorado, and we had a couple of close calls with Cal as they are nearly getting that Pac-12 win. How long has it been since they last won a Pac-12 game? Also, we had the AVP happening in Huntington Beach, as I'll be recapping that, and we have a couple of NCAA men's volleyball schedules to break down. You know what the deal is. Hand me a volleyball. Set the net, because I'm about to serve you up some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for joining me on this beautiful Monday afternoon, Monday evening, Monday wherever you are listening from. Either way, you have made yourself into episode 168 of Set Point. Without any further delay, let's get pizizzy. But first and foremost, Set Point would not be where it's at without IE Sports Radio. You can find IE Sports Radio on several different social media platforms such as Twitter, Instagram, and on TikTok at IE Sports Radio. And then you could also follow IE Sports Radio on Facebook by typing in the word IE, then Sports, then Radio in the search bar. You could also head to iesportsradio.com where they have a Patreon link which starts at $5 a month. By the way, this Patreon link is at the top, by the way, so you can't really miss it, but I digress. Anyway, the Patreon link starts at $5 a month, and this will get you a shout-out from all of our shows, including Set Point. And higher tiers include IE Sports Radio merchandise, access to IESRU, and even a chance to be featured on a segment of our flagship show, The Defining Moment with Larry B. Because for the past 8 years and counting, IE Sports Radio has been making lots of amazing shows and live broadcasts dedicated to all major sports cities and major sports all across the country. In addition, IE Sports Radio has interviewed lots of legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel. All the while, we've been continuing to be by the fans and for the fans, and with your help, we are ready to take the next biggest step. Thank you to everyone for all of your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that sports. Big shout out to our Patreon supporters, Bay Area Raised Apparel, Key to the Gate, Marcus Losgreat, and a donor that wishes to remain anonymous. Now let's get this volleyball show on the road. But first, before we jump on into NCAA women's volleyball, we got to go over a couple of NCAA men's volleyball schedules. So a couple just dropped today, as we had two coming from, I wouldn't say the East Coast. We had one coming from the Midwest and the other coming from the East Coast, as now it just goes to show that their NCAA men's volleyball season is right around the corner. As we say hello to Larry B in the chat room, he says, "Good evening, Teran." Adam Karnick says, "Hello, Teran." And Mike Pat says, "Have a great show, Teran." I appreciate y'all. But first, we're going to break down Loyola's schedule. Adam actually just wrapped up Chi-Town Weekly, so this is perfect. So start with Loyola's schedule. They kick off their season on Monday, January 9th against Missouri S&T. And that's also their home opener, by the way. And then on Thursday, they'll remain at home to take on Cheng, which I imagine that's in Tennessee. That is in Tennessee. And then The day after, they will remain in Chicago in the Gentile Arena to take on UC San Diego. Then next Friday, January 20th. Oh, by the way, the Missouri S&T is on January 9th. King is on January 12th. And then UC San Diego is on January 13th. Then on January 20th, a Friday, Loyola heads down to Newark, New Jersey to take on NJIT. Then the day after, they'll hit the road to Brooklyn to take on LIU Brooklyn. So basically, they're going to be in New York for that weekend, which should be a good little test for them. Then on January 27th, Loyola returns to take on Maryville, and then the day after, they welcome St. Francis of Brooklyn. Then Loyola heads down to California for a couple of matches against California teams. Starting on February 2nd, they play Concordia of Irvine, which will be on a Thursday. Then on Friday, February 3rd, they'll be hitting the road to the 562 to take on Long Beach State, which I imagine I'll probably see that matchup. Then Loyola kicks off MIVA action as they hit the road, they head back to Illinois, but they hit the road to Quincy to take on Quincy. Then the day after, they head down to St. Charles to take on Lindenwood. That's on February 11th, and then the Quincy matchup is on February 10th, a Friday. Then on Thursday, February 16th, Loyola welcomes Ball State. Now, Loyola has had a lot of success against Ball State this past season, so I imagine they'll most likely be ready for them. And they're playing somewhat of a tough schedule. I mean, some of these teams are a little challenging, but they obviously don't want to schedule teams that are remotely or pretty much impossible to defeat, but I digress. And then also the same week, on February 18th, the Saturday, Loyola welcomes Ohio State. Then Loyola heads down to Romeoville on February 22nd, a Wednesday, to take on Lewis. Then Loyola returns back to Chicago, Illinois, to welcome McKendree. That is on February 25th. Then 1 week after that, they welcome Purdue of Fort Wayne to their humble abode. And then Loyola randomly takes a break from conference play to play Queens. That is on a Tuesday, March 7th. And then on March 12th, a Sunday, Loyola hits the road to Lebanon to take on McKendree. Then, once again, Loyola takes another break from conference play as they welcome Charleston on March 16th. Then on March 18th, Loyola heads down to Fort Wayne, Indiana to take on Purdue Fort Wayne. Then March 23rd, a Thursday, Loyola plays Lewis, which that's obviously a big-time matchup. Lewis didn't have the best season it had last season, but they should be better this year. And then another break for Loyola in the middle of their MIVA schedule, as they actually play two non-conference teams. As March 25th, they're actually going to be playing at George Mason. They'll play Princeton on March 25th, a Saturday. And then on March 26th, a Sunday, they'll play the host, George Mason. Then on March 31st, Loyola welcomes Lindenwood to Gentile Arena. And then April 1st, they welcome Quincy. Then April 6th, a Thursday, they'll be hitting the road to Muncie to take on Ball State. And then lastly, Loyola closes out its regular season schedule at Ohio State. Then they basically have the MIVA tournament, which anything can happen. So that's basically Loyola's schedule in a nutshell, in a pretty simplified nutshell right there. The Ramblers always seem to have a decent team, but I feel they have some good matchups to watch for. I definitely want to see them in action when they play Long Beach State. Now, obviously they're obviously going to have a new head coach, John Hawks, and it'll be quite the interesting season for the Ramblers, but I feel they have a good shot at doing well in the MIVA. But we'll have to see what happens, because Ball State is good, Lewis is good, Loyola is up there, Ohio State's improving, McKendree had a great year, Purdue Fort Wayne was kind of the darling of the MIVA tournament, or the Cinderella that almost was until they ran into Ball State. So it's going to be quite the year in the MIVA and for Loyola of Chicago. Jumping on over to another team from the East Coast. Well, that was Midwest. This one's going to be the East Coast, as This time, the schedule we're going to break down is Penn State. So this is Penn State's men's volleyball schedule. They open up their season on Friday at Central State, which is in Wilberforce, Ohio. Then the day after, January 7th, Penn State hits the road to Columbus, Ohio to take on its fellow Pac-12 foe, Ohio State. Or not Pac-12 foe, Big Ten foe, Ohio State. But there is no Big Ten in men's volleyball. Just got to clarify. It's just that those two are the only men's volleyball programs within the entire Big Ten. Like, there is no Wisconsin men's volleyball. There is no Nebraska men's volleyball. There's none of that. It's only just Ohio State and Penn State. Then Penn State has its home opener on January 13th against Damon. And then the following day, they welcome Merrimack. Then they play in the First Point Collegiate Challenge in Austin, Texas, starting on January 20th against Pepperdine. And then the day after, they play Stanford, which should be both modes are kind of intriguing, if you ask me. Then Penn State welcomes Long Beach State on January 25th. That's going to be a good matchup right there. I only wish it was at the Pyramid and not at Long Beach or not at Penn State, but it still should be a great matchup overall. Then they have the Big Ten Pac-12 Challenge as February 3rd they welcome USC and UCLA. They play USC on Friday, February 3rd, and then they play Penn State February 4th, which is always a good battle test for Penn State, as this time it's going to be the Pac-12 schools coming over to Penn State. Last year it was Penn State and Ohio State going over to UCLA, but this time I think it is Penn State's turn. It is Penn State's turn to host, and then I think next year will be USC's turn, and then the next year it'll be Ohio State's turn, and then the cycle will go back to UCLA hosting. Then Penn State closes out non-conference play against St. Francis. Now, St. Francis used to be in its conference, but I imagine it's in the Coastal Carolinas, as this one is going to be played at Loretto, Pennsylvania. So Penn State's last road trip is, well, I say road trip loosely, but they're in the same state as St. Francis, but I digress. So Penn State, right off the bat, they kick off EIVA play against Princeton on February 17th and February 18th. Both are at home. I imagine Penn State's going to have a lot on their mind when it comes to facing Princeton, since Princeton was the team that knocked them out of the EIVA tournament semifinals last season. And Penn State, that loss also derailed Penn State's NCAA tournament hopes, as they were the first one out. If they don't lose that matchup, they're at least guaranteed to be an at-large. But unfortunately, Penn State lost in the semifinals to Princeton, which Princeton was the 4 seed, and Penn State just was not slowing down for anybody. Just goes to show that you can't take any team for granted. You just can't. And then the following week, on February 24th and 25th, Penn State hits the road to Newark to take on NJIT in New Jersey. And then Penn State has a little bit of a break. They have an extended break when it comes to the EIVA. I imagine that might be maybe spring break, or they have their bye. But either way, on March 4th, Penn State hits the road to California to take on Concordia of Irvine. Then the day after, Penn State will still stay in California to take on UC Irvine. That's a matchup I will probably want to see, just because Irvine looked good in their scrimmage against Hawaii, but I want to see how they stack up against Penn State, because Penn State, they return a good portion of their players, and I imagine Penn State has a lot of unfinished business to attend to. Then Penn State heads out to Honolulu for the Outrigger Challenge, as they play UCLA on March 9th, a Thursday, Hawaii on March 11th, a Saturday, and then they also play Purdue Fort Wayne that same day. So they got a doubleheader on March 11th. Then Penn State will play St. Francis in another non-conference game on March 18th, and then on Tuesday, March 21st, Penn State plays Ohio State, it's always a great matchup between Penn State and Ohio State. Then Penn State resumes EIVA play at Harvard on March 31st and 1st. Then Penn State will still be on the road to take on George Mason on April 7th and 8th. Then Penn State also has College of Charleston at home on April 14th and 15th. And that's pretty much that for Penn State's schedule, as the following week they have the EIVA tournament, and then they await their fate. So Penn State, like I said, they return a good portion of their team. I think they only lose like 1 or 2 players from last year. But for Penn State, this is going to be a promising season. They definitely have a great overall team. Their coach is amazing. Mark Pavlik has done an excellent job. And their schedule last year was very impressive. Like, they didn't have too many... Well, they had a few up and down stretches. They did have the stretch where they struggled in California when they lost to UC Santa Barbara, USC, and UCLA, but then they beat Long Beach after they lost to UC Santa Barbara. And then they had the stretch where they just ran past everybody in the EIVA, and then, like I said, they wound up losing in the EIVA semifinals to Princeton, which wound up winning the entire EIVA and which wound up winning an NCAA tournament game. Actually, no, they didn't win an NCAA tournament game. They lost in the first round, so my apologies. But anyway, for Penn State, I think this is going to be a great season for them. I imagine they should be able to make the NCAA tournament so long as they don't have another mishap like last year. I also did hear that the NCAA tournament is expanding its tournament from 8 teams to 12, but it's not the standard 8 teams. It's not one seed versus 8th seed and so on and so forth. It's basically going to be another longer expanded season. It would basically be a longer expanded season. I feel it should... I like the format as is, but I feel that it just goes by so quickly. I think maybe it should be 3 weeks, but I'm not sure. That's just a lot of volleyball and a long layoff for teams that don't get to play. But I think a 12-team bracket would still be beneficial for NCAA men's volleyball teams, just because it gives more teams a little bit better of a chance to make the tournament. I imagine like some teams from like lower conferences that's not like the Big West, that's not the Mountain MPSF or the EIVA or the MIVA. Like, that's kind of your Power 4 conferences right there, and everyone else is basically the undertow, but I digress on that. So Adam says boo Penn State, and he also says Chicago and Illinois, brr. Yeah, if you are listening live on Spreaker, definitely hop into the chat room and listen on in. It's definitely a lot of fun, and it definitely keeps me company. But that's basically that for the NCAA men's volleyball schedule breakdowns. Now, last week I did not talk about this, and I totally forgot about this event that was happening, but this past weekend on Saturday and Sunday, we had the Huntington Beach Open. Yes, the AVP returned, but their Gold Series is done. The Tour Series has returned, however, as they have 2 more tournaments remaining. I think they have the Tour Series, and then they have 1 more Tour Series tournament, as that's going to be in like Florida. But this past weekend, we had the AVP heading down to Huntington Beach, Surf City, California, and it was a great event. Now, I attended this event, and I want to go both days, but I was wrapped up on Saturday. Sunday, I was a little less wrapped up, and I actually got to attend my first ever AVP event. It was great. Now, obviously, it was a little tough for me to check out all the volleyball action, just because sometimes there are 4 matches going on. There's the stadium, the Sun Court on the stadium. There are 4 courts. There's the Sun Court Stadium, which has like the bleachers and whatnot. Bleachers on one side, 2 sides of bleachers, but all on one side. And then there's the Sun Court 1, Sun Court 2, and Sun Court 3, which is basically lumped all together. So basically, if you're playing in the stadium court, you're basically at a better advantage than playing on courts 1, 2, or 3, because those courts are pretty much all together. So it took me a while to find the courts, but then I found out there are numbers on there, and then I found out that those courts are basically nearby the Sun Court Stadium. So it took me a while to basically like adapt myself. I wanted to like tweet out the results of every matchup happening, and it was kind of a mistake just because I'm just going to kind of get this out of the way. I think most people would rather like be informed of the semifinals, but I didn't mind. It just took me a while to remember each and every pair, and it took me a while to like find out where the scoreboard was and what the first set score was and what set it was in. And I also did not want to disturb the referees just because they were basically busy at work. And yeah, I kind of asked on one of the referees who won the first set, and I didn't know who was playing at first. And then he said he needed to get back to his job, and I'm like, oh, okay. So it was a little tough for me to navigate at first, but thankfully I did ask other people who were watching the tournament matches, and they were a big help to me, so I appreciate that. But once the matchups started going like two matches going at a time, or one match going on one court and then another match going on the other sand courts, basically it was just second nature. And eventually we got, and you're probably all just waiting on me talking about the on who won the final. So basically, I guess I should mention the the AVP seeds, just because I did not get to talk about this, unfortunately, just because, well, for starters, I blanked on this, unfortunately. I blanked on this whole tournament altogether, but again, you can't really fully blame me, just because with all the NCAA volleyball that's happening, and with the last AVP tournament happening a month and a half ago, you could forgive me for not knowing when another AVP tournament was going to be. And also, I don't mean to say this in a negative way, but the Tour Series wasn't as big as the Gold Series. Like, the Gold Series is kind of like the Super Bowl of the AVP. And for me, that was kind of what everyone was drawn to. Like, this was also a good event. We had some big-time names happening, but unfortunately, it wasn't as big as the Phoenix Championships. Like, that right there, the Phoenix Championships was big time. It was a fun time, and I wish I could have attended, but I had other things to do. And it's in Phoenix, so what can you do? So in terms of the entry list, the number 1 seed was Taylor Crabb and Taylor Sander. Number 2 seed was Evan Corey and Paul Lottman. 3 seed Timothy Brewster and Kyle Friend. And the 4th seed was Jake Didrich and Hagen Smith. Those were basically your top 4 seeds. On the women's side, we had Kelly Cheng and Sara Hughes as the number 1 seed. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but Kelly Cheng and Sara Hughes were both former USC standouts. They were partners, and then after college, I think they still were partners, and then they kind of split up to do their own thing. Well, now they've reunited, and it's definitely good for them. Then the number 2 seed on the women's side was Allie Wheeler and Deanna Kraft. 3 seed was Molly Turner and Caitlin Mullaney, and then 4th seed was Haley Harward and Kelly Reeves. So, jumping on into this tournament, I'm just going to skip to, like, the semifinals. So, the semifinals on the men's side, well, we'll go in chronological order. So, women's side, the semifinals was Kelly Cheng and Sara Hughes taking on, I'm going to try to pronounce this correctly, just so I don't make Kimberly Hildreth and Carolina Marciniak. Yeah, the women's, there was quite a bit of upsets that happened, as Allie Wheeler and Deanna Kraft was upset, and they didn't even make it to the preliminary round, which I don't know how I feel about that. But it just goes to show that anything can happen. It's any given day, as Hildreth and Marciniak actually upset Wheeler and Kraft in the winners bracket, and eventually Hildreth and Marciniak lost in Hildreth and Marciniak advanced to the Winners' Cup Finals, and then unfortunately for Kraft and Wheeler, they unfortunately fell in the consolation bracket, which was bad. It was not fun for them. It wasn't good times, but that's sports, unfortunately, but they'll live to fight another day. So also in the other semifinal, it was Molly Turner and Caitlin Mullaney taking on Brooke Bauer and Katie Horton. So I didn't even hear of this pair until I saw their seed. They were the 9th seed, and the fact that they got all the way to the semifinals was downright impressive. They kind of had a little bit of a scare in the quarterfinals, but they were able to handle that quite nicely. And then Molly Turner and her partner they didn't really have too many problems, honestly. I feel that if you know Molly Turner, you know that she has done it big when it comes to like international tournaments, and overall, I knew she was going to be a tough nut to crack when it comes to her taking on any opponents. They did have a little bit of a scare in their little, okay, I wouldn't say a big scare, but they basically, it wasn't overly bad. They took down Hildreth and Marciniak in their little winners bracket final as they advanced, as well as Kelly Cheng and Sara Hughes. As for the contenders bracket, Brooke Bauer and Katie Horton took down Megan Rice and Carly Wopat in 3 sets. This was the matchup that kind of had a little bit of a scare. And then Hildreth and Marciniak took down Savvy Simo and her partner Jessica Gaffney. So basically, that's basically your what happened in the quarterfinals or supposed quarterfinals. But in the semifinals, it was basically just sweep city as Kelly Cheng and Sara Hughes swept Hildreth and Marciniak, and then Brooke Bauer and Katie Horton swept Turner and Mullaney. I was a little surprised to see Brooke Bauer and Katie Horton just sweeping their way. Like, Molly Turner is very talented, and Mullaney also was up there in talent as well, but unfortunately, they just crumbled against Brooke Bauer and Katie Horton. Now, those two were probably the most dangerous pair out there. I think for me, they were kind of they were probably everyone's dark horse to win it all in terms of this AVP event. But the fact that they made the finals was impressive. Unfortunately for them, their finals run came to an end as Kelly Cheng and Sara Hughes swept the women's final 21-18, 21-7. They dominated in that second set. It was just pure domination for Hughes and Cheng. Keep in mind, they do have some team chemistry with one another, and it was not surprising to see them come out on top. And they didn't even drop a set. They were the number 1 overall seed, and they made it look easy out there. Like, they really made it easy. So after the tournament, I caught up with tournament champions Sara Hughes and Kelly Cheng to talk about their first tournament back together and what it meant winning this tournament. All right, Sara and Kelly, first tournament back together, and you two basically were dominant. What was the chemistry like reuniting together?
It was amazing. It just feels so natural on the court together, and I'm so happy to be back with Kelly, and I think we showed that in this tournament.
Yeah. We had so much fun. I think this tournament was really about kind of finding our rhythm and refinding that chemistry because we haven't played together in 5 years or something. So it's been.
Okay, but I'm going to stop right there just because, unfortunately, I did have to battle some wind, and then I also had to battle some background noise just because the men's final was getting underway, and we couldn't really find a quiet spot, so we had to make it work somehow. Back to the interview.
Fun getting to reconnect and fight on the court and fight together. It was awesome.
Now, obviously, you both had different partners in the past. Sara with Kelly Kalinsky, and then Kelly with Betsy Flint. What was it like partnering with those two, and how did that help you get ready for this tournament?
Yeah, I mean, I think both Kelly and I have nothing but appreciation for our former partners. We just really liked them so much and had a great time playing with them, and they ultimately made us better people, better players. So when it was time to come together, it was even a better transition.
Now, winning this tournament, how big is winning this tournament, especially for you, Sara, since you're a native of Huntington Beach?
I mean, it means everything, mostly because Kelly and I, it's our first one back, and we wanted to prove that we're meant to be together. We're meant to be on the court together and win, so it was great.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Do you plan on attending the next tournament, or will we be seeing you somewhere down the line, or what's next for you two?
Our next event will be in Australia, so we're about to fly out and play against all the best players in the world. We're really excited.
Thank you, Sara and Kelly. Congrats on the tournament win, and good luck the rest of the way.
Thank you.
So that was my post-tournament interview with Kelly Cheng and Sara Hughes. Again, I apologize for the wind and the background noise. Like I said, the men's final was getting underway, and there was no, media room. It's not like the NVA where it had a media room up top from the court that it had, but that was basically my interview with Sara Hughes and Kelly Cheng. Overall, it was great to see them. First of all, it was great to see them in person. I first, when I got to the tournament, that Sara Hughes was the first person I ran into. I'm like, oh my goodness, it's Sara Hughes. Keep calm, Teran. But then I eventually saw them, and they were just dominant. There's no better way to say that. Nothing was going to get in their way. Nothing was going to get in the way of winning their first tournament together. And it was great to see them just being their dominant self. They did have a little bit of a challenge in their first match of the day, but everyone has those little close call sets in certain tournaments. I mean, they didn't drop any sets altogether, so it just showed that they still have it in them. And honestly, I think they put the entire beach volleyball world on notice. I really think that Sara Hughes and Kelly Cheng can become big time, and as long as they stay together and they stay healthy, they are totally going to do big things for Cheng and for one another. So that's the women's side of things in terms of the recap. Jumping on back over to the men's side of things. So the men's side of things, it was great. It was also great. I did know one person there, or one player that played in there. It was by the name of Avery Drost, and it took me a while to find out where he was at and what he looked like again, even though I knew what he looked like. But then I found him, and then we just reunited, because I know he's the head coach of Miracosta High School, and we basically talked about that. I said, I didn't see you at the Miracosta match, and it was like, I was at the AVP tournament competing, and I'm like, I remember that. Anyway, so for Avery Drost, this was kind of an interesting tournament for him and his partner, Chase Frischman, as their first match, they had to play Taylor Crabb and Taylor Sander, the number 1 seed, and unfortunately they wound up losing, knocking them back into the contenders bracket. Fortunately for them, they were able to turn the tide as they managed to defeat Michael Plummer. I'm going to get this right. I got to get this right. So, John Michael Plummer and Travis Meewerder. I accidentally misspelled his name. I put Meeshirter, but it's Meewerder. Thanks, autocorrect. Anyway, Avery Drost and Chase Frischman advanced to the semifinals despite having to go through the contenders bracket, which it's always good to see teams fighting through and emerging as big-time winners. And then also, Sean Cook and Logan Weber took down Timothy Brewster and Kyle Friend in the other contenders bracket final, as that was kind of a stunner right there, considering Brewster and Friend were the number 3 seed, and they actually lost to Meewerder and Michael Plummer in the first match of the day. So the fact that they lost, they didn't even make it to the semifinals, it's a little mind-boggling, but overall, again, it's any given tournament day, or any given championship day. We'll just leave it at that. There we go. So Taylor Crabb and Taylor Sander took on Sean Cook and Logan Weber. The match actually went 5, so it wasn't smooth sailing for Taylor Sander and Taylor Crabb, as the second set, they actually nearly rallied back from a 20-17 deficit, but unfortunately, Sean Cook and Logan Weber were able to take that second set. Crabb and Sander won the first set 21-17, and then in the third set, Crabb and Sander got off to a hot start, and all Cook and Weber can do is just hope that they can get back on track, but unfortunately, they were unable to. The clock kind of struck midnight for them as Team Taylor wound up winning the fifth set 15-9, advancing to the final, where they took on Avery Drost and Chase Frischman, who beat Bill Kolinsky, and I actually got a Salila Tucker in the other semifinal, 21-12 and 21-15, and it was a big statement win for Avery Drost and Chase Frischman. I was quite impressed with how they were able to win matches after they lost their first match of the day. So the fact that they got back to the final was impressive, and the fact that they were in the final was also very good. Now, unfortunately, I did not see the final in person. I had to see it via remotely just because I had other obligations happening on Sunday. But what I did see was that Taylor Sander and Taylor Crabb won the championship 21-17, 21-14. As Taylor and Taylor are back on top, there was not really a Phoenix Championships hangover for them, as they still have the great team chemistry right there. I will give it up for Avery Drost and Chase Frischman. They really performed well, and like I said, they had to go through the contenders bracket and then make their way all the way up to the semifinals, and then they had to make it to the final. Unfortunately, they just fell just short, as I still think Avery Drost and whoever partner he's had, they have yet to win an AVP tournament, and I hope my boy Avery Drost does win an AVP tournament just because he's such a great guy. He's a great family man, and you gotta love him. Like, he always spreads positivity, but overall, I'm just hoping for the best for my man. So great job to Avery Drost and his partner Chase Frischman. As for Taylor Crabb and Taylor Sander, it's just another chapter of, I wouldn't say dominance, but just another chapter of accomplishments for them. They really have themselves great team chemistry, as it was just a great tournament overall, and I got to see a lot of talent, and I got to see other like volleyball, other former or current volleyball players. I got to see Rachel Kramer, the former University of Florida middle blocker. I saw Haley Harward, who I got to cover at Long Beach State before she went off to USC. I got to meet Julia Scholes, who was on USC's team, which wound up winning the NCAA beach volleyball tournament. And then I got to also be a part of Haley Harward's fan club for a brief moment, which was nice. And then I also got to see Maddie Shields, the former Pepperdine star, when it came to seeing matches, and I accidentally mistook her for Megan Kraft, which oof, nice job, Teran. But I didn't know at first. I saw USC, and I totally forgot that Maddie Shields transferred from Pepperdine over to USC for beach volleyball. Oops. More on her a little bit later, but overall, and then I got to see some other people at the tournament that I knew as well. But overall, it was just a fun little experience that I had watching the AVP. Like, I don't get to go to these AVP events often just because most of them are basically out of the state. I really want to go to the Manhattan Beach Open just because that is what everyone calls the granddaddy of them all, because I think the AVP originated in Manhattan Beach. I just got to find a way to get like a media pass so I could have more access to better shots, just because when I was there, as the matches progressed, it was tough to get like good angles, but what can you do? So that was basically my weekend at the AVP in the Huntington Beach Open. I really did enjoy it, and I can't wait for the next Huntington Beach Open, if not the Manhattan Beach Open. I definitely want to attend that one just because I have a feeling that one is an electric one. So as for the AVP altogether, there is one more tournament, ladies and gentlemen. There is one more tournament to go in the AVP season. It is actually the Central Florida Open. That's going to be from December 2nd all the way to December 4th. It is going to be located in Tavares, Florida. And it's a main draw. There are 16 teams, as basically there are 8 automatic entries, 16 main draws, and 2 wild cards, and the event details read, the AVP Pro Series in Central Florida will be played December 2nd at Hickory Point Recreation Park on the shores of Lake Harris. Yeah, that's basically it, which makes me sad. So the entry list surprisingly has been released, as might as well talk about that right now. So Cheng, Kame Schulk and Theo Brunner are the number 1 seed. Taylor Crabb and Phil Dalhouser are the number 2 seed. Triborn and John Hyden are the number 3 seed. And then Andy Benish and Miles Evans are the number 4 seed. Actually, no, the seeds are to be determined. Gosh dang it. But these are basically the teams with the most points, as Schulk and Brunner are basically the team with the most points. And then Taylor Crabb and Phil Dalhouser are second in terms of points together. And that goes all the way down. So, reading off the other main draw entries from 5 through 8, they consist of Chase Buninger and Reed Pretty, then Paul Lotman and Evan Corey, then Timothy Brewster and Kyle Friend, and then Jake Diedrich and Hagen Smith. And then everyone else is basically a qualifier. Oh, also another main draw pair, Roberto Rodriguez and Dave Palm, and Sean Cook and Logan Weber. So that's basically all of your main draw people, and then everyone else is basically a qualifier. So they basically have to play on Friday, and then they got to play Saturday, and then Sunday. Saturday, by the way, is my birthday, so there's that right there. And on the women's side, we have Therese Cannon and Sarah Sponsel. Then we have Gina Urango and Emily Day. Then Corinne Quiggle and Sarah Schermerhorn. And then Deanna Kraft and Allie Wheeler. That's basically your top, well, so far your top 4 seeds in terms of total points, but not the official top seed. Not just yet, anyway. And then the other top 8 main draws, and then one more main draw happens to be Molly Turner and Caitlin Mullaney, Haley Harward and Kelly Reeves, Carly Can and Jennifer Ketty, and Carly Skogit and Katie Dickens. And then the last main draw qualifier is Jessica Gaffney and Savvy Simo. Again, the seeds aren't determined just yet, as you could just go to the avp.com, and then this is actually going to be a pro series as opposed to being a tour series. So I think the difference between those two is basically the money won, I want to say, because for this one, the prize is $125,000. I think that goes to both pairs, whereas the Huntington Beach Open, the prize was $50,000, which I don't know. So anyway, I don't know if this is going to be free or not. I imagine it will be, just because, again, it's not like a Gold Series tournament, but for me, it's still a tournament. We're getting some AVP, so AVP fans, or beach volleyball fans in general, should be excited about this, and I can't wait for this. I'll try to cover this as much as I can. I promise y'all. So that's basically going to do it for the AVP portion of the show. It was great to have some AVP, and I promise you all I will discuss the AVP's final tournament of the season, as the Central Florida Open will hopefully go out with a bang. Now let's jump on over to some NCAA women's volleyball, because that's what everyone is mostly waiting for, just because that's what's currently in season. So last Wednesday, I actually had the honor of attending the USC-Stanford game, but I was a little late getting there. I was covering a high school girls volleyball game between Newport Harbor and Miracosta. Long story short, Miracosta and Newport Harbor are rivals. They're not like bad blood rivals, but they're like rivals in volleyball. Whether it's boys or girls volleyball, Miracosta and Newport Harbor is always a great little rivalry in terms of volleyball. So I went to that matchup, and not to my surprise, Miracosta won. They have a lot of athletes, though. They have, get this, they had 16 overall athletes on their signing day, and 8 of them were for volleyball. That's amazing right there. Meanwhile, for Newport Harbor, they had 2 signees for volleyball on their signing day. So, yeah, big oof. So, unfortunately for Newport Harbor, their season ended. But Miracosta, let me tell you about Miracosta. That team is a good team. They actually wound up upsetting Sierra Canyon in the SoCal Regional Semifinals, which is basically the state quarterfinals, and it was quite a great night for Miracosta. It was a great week overall for Miracosta altogether. So now jumping back to the USC-Stanford matchup, that was basically the prelude. So USC-Stanford, I got to the USC-Stanford matchup right in the early stages of the third set. It was actually 2-0 USC. Yes, USC jumped out to a 2-0 lead. And I'm just getting the updates on Twitter. I'm like, holy mackerel. USC could actually pull off the biggest win of their season. And it looked as if they were going to try to pull off that third set win. But after USC crossed 15, Stanford caught their second win. They took the third set 25, I think it was 25-21. Then the fourth set, it was also back and forth. It looked as if Stanford was going to force the fifth set, but then USC went up 20-18 after being down 18-16. And then they went up 22-20, which had Stanford calling timeout. But then Stanford, being the talented team that they are, the current top 10, they tied it up at 22-22. Then Stanford challenged a USC point that they won. They lost the challenge. They were out of challenges at that point, so it was 23-22, and it looked as if Stanford was about to be upset. But then they had this one little player named Kendall Kipp, and she just smashed down a kill, which tied it up at 23-23. And then this part was probably the most mind-blowing part that happened. So Kendall Kipp was back to serve. 23-23, Kendall Kipp has a very good serve. And she goes to serve. It looks as if USC corrals it well. So they bump it up, and then it looks as if it's going to be passed really well. But then no one goes to the ball. No one's there to like bump it or set it to like the hitter, and then it just drops on the floor. And then every USC fan was just stunned. And I'm like, oh my God, how does that happen? It was just so mind-blowing, and it just made everyone's jaw drop. That was probably the easiest point Stanford got all night. And then on the following point, Kendall Kipp, her serve is like a floating jump serve, and then it just grazed off the tape, and then one of the USC players was unable to corral it as it went down as a service ace, and that's how Stanford forced a fifth set. Kendall Kipp was basically the offense, basically carried that team in that fourth set, late in that fourth set. That's just how good Kendall Kipp is. And then the fifth set, Stanford pretty much just blew the doors off of USC. It was 1-1, and then I think it was like a 5-0 run, which put Stanford up 6-1, and it was not even close. Like everything just went Stanford's way. Stanford had all of the momentum, and that's how Stanford reverse swept USC. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, if USC wants to have a match back, that is the one they need to have back. I should also make note that USC did not have Skylar Fields. She was out, and thanks to one of the nice USC moms who told me that Skylar Fields was out, that could have also helped as well. But they played so well. Like, Amelia Vesca played well. Their middles were well. Katie Smith played well as Kalia Williams, and then Jordan Wilson was great on the left and right side. She filled in pretty much for Skylar when she was out. So it was quite the tough loss for USC. It's like, oh my God. And it's just all about fundamentals. You have to get that ball. I was very surprised because not even high schoolers would make that mistake. So it's just all about communication and who's going to go for the ball. Because the ball cannot float in the air forever. So, yeah, it was just disappointing altogether for USC. This was definitely their biggest chance to make a statement and to basically stamp their way in to the NCAA tournament. But unfortunately, it just was not meant to be. So I wish I could have like the full recap on USC Stanford, but like I said, I arrived late. Long story short, USC won the first set, and then when I arrived, they started losing. So I'm sorry to USC fans, but that's just how it is. I'm just kidding. I wasn't bad luck. I mean, I'm mainly a USC guy in terms of athletics, but I'm more of a Stanford guy, I guess, because I have more friends on there. Though I have a couple friends on USC as well. But overall, it was a great comeback for Stanford, they really showed why they're a top team in the nation. So I got to tip my hat to them. I also did bump into Dylan Klein, a former Set Point guest at the Galen Center at the USC matchup, and I had to get a picture of him. So for those of you that don't know what I look like, you basically found me out. Well, I've posted recap videos as well, so you should know what I look like by now. So I actually, I think it was like early the next morning, I actually get a message from one of my followers, and he actually just so happens to be the assistant coach for Cal State Monterey Bay's women's volleyball team, and I was like, "Whoa, dude! I did not see this coming." So Cody Jankowski is his name. So Cody Jankowski, apparently he saw me at the Mira Costa Newport Harbor match, and he was like, he messages me, and he says, "I totally didn't realize it was you who was sitting in front of me at the Newport Harbor game last night. You're doing really good work. Keep it up." And basically he was there just to keep an eye on one of his players that committed to Monterey Bay, Malia Thorne. And he said he's got something in the works as well. And I told him all about what I do. I cover Newport Harbor sports, and I basically covered quite a bit of Newport Harbor volleyball this past season. Not only because they're my alma mater, but they have a rich history in terms of volleyball, and also, like I said, they're my alma mater, and I wanted to see how they would do this year. They did not have any expectations. I know they lost to Mira Costa in the first round of the SoCal Regionals, but the fact that they were even in the Open Division is quite astounding. So I gotta give a big shout to Cody Jankowski for bumping into me, and I totally apologize for not noticing him at first. And I did see him at the game. I did see his face, but I felt so horrible for not saying anything. So big shout to you, Cody. And wrong one. So, yes, it was great to see one of my Set Point followers at a game, and I felt really bad for not saying hello earlier, but I didn't know who he was at first. So, anyway, so now that we're talking about high school volleyball at this moment, might as well talk about the CIF State Open Division Regional Final. So, the Southern Section Regional Finals, or the SoCal Regional Finals, consist of Cathedral Catholic versus Mira Costa. That'll be played tomorrow. As of this recording, this is being recorded on November 14th, while the SoCal Regional Final will be played on November 15th, a Tuesday. So Cathedral Catholic has swept both of their first-round opponents. They swept Lakewood 25-21, 25-15, 25-17, and then they swept Torrey Pines, which upset Mater Dei in the previous round, 25-20, 25-16, 25-12. While Mira Costa, like I said, they beat Newport Harbor in the first round, 25-18, 25-23, 25-18, and then they upset the number 2 seed Sierra Canyon in the SoCal Regional semifinals in 5 sets, 26-28, 25-19, 25-18, 23-25, and then 15-13. So, for this matchup, this is going to be quite the interesting matchup between Cathedral Catholic and Mira Costa. Mira Costa is playing better volleyball than it did in the Southern Section Final against Sierra Canyon. It got its revenge. Now they face Cathedral Catholic, which has not lost a set, let alone a match, all season. And something I did a lot of research when it came to Cathedral Catholic and its girls volleyball team. It has the chance to be the first undefeated team to not drop a set in probably all of girls volleyball history, just because I don't think in the modern day era there's been a team that has gone undefeated and that has not lost a set. I mean, there probably was teams in like the olden days era, the side out scoring era, which you had to score via a side out. But overall, for for Cathedral Catholic. They do have a chance to make history. The team that came the closest to achieving perfection without dropping a set and going undefeated was Lake Travis of Austin, Texas. They went 50-0, and they only dropped one set. And that was the second to last match of the season, as they lost a set to Foster of Richmond in a playoff game, which I imagine was like the semifinals, if not the regional finals, as they lost that second set 25-22. So obviously that must have been heartbreaking, but the fact that they went 50-0 and they managed to only lose one set, that's impressive. Dang. But Cathedral Catholic has a chance to achieve perfection. First, they have to get past Miracosta from the SoCal Regional Finals, and then they have to win the state championship, which is going to be held on Saturday. I am most likely attending if Cathedral Catholic is undefeated. If Cathedral Catholic somehow loses a set or they don't make it to the final, then I probably won't attend. But we'll see. I mean, I have a soft spot for Miracosta just because Charlie Furbringer plays on that team, because I'm friends with Joy and Matt since they both used to coach at Long Beach State. So why not? maybe I'll go to the game, or maybe I'll just go to UC Irvine, Long Beach State. We'll see. On the NorCal side of things, the number 1 and number 2 seeds still stayed put, as St. Francis, the number 1 seed, St. Francis of Mountain View, they will take on Archbishop Mitty, which has always been the Northern California girls volleyball factory, as both teams swept their first round matchups, and they'll be facing each other for a second time. Now, here's the thing about St. Francis of Mountain View. They are 33-0, but unlike Cathedral Catholic, they've lost a few sets along the way. They even, in their most recent matchup, they actually had to go 5 with... Or in their most recent matchup against Archbishop Mitty, which was in the CIF Northern NorCal finals, the Northern Section finals, they actually had to go 5 with Archbishop Mitty, and they actually barely won that one in 5, as Mitty came so close to handing St. Francis their first loss, but unfortunately it was not meant to be, as the Monarchs just fell short. But it's all good for them, as they have a chance to rewrite some history. Now, Archbishop Mitty, Brett Alcaraz Cesar was their former coach, but now they have a new head coach. I think he's in his second or third year. His new head coach's name is John Wallace. I think he was a former coach at Santa Clara, and he did used to coach at Santa Clara, if not Pacific. Either way, he has coaching experience. The funny thing is about John Wallace. So here's the thing about John Wallace. He is the head coach for Archbishop Mitty Volleyball, right? His daughter actually plays for St. Francis. So Whitney Wallace is the daughter of John Wallace, but she plays for St. Francis and not for Archbishop Mitty. So it's pretty interesting to see when it came to St. Francis and Archbishop Mitty. Now the two are facing one another in the NorCal Regional Finals, and basically it's a trip to state. And if Archbishop Mitty wins, then Daddy gets to cheer on his daughter in the state finals. But if St. Francis beats Archbishop Mitty, then the Daddy will be cheering on his daughter. But if Archbishop Mitty beats St. Francis, then the daughter will be cheering on Daddy. But it's vice versa if St. Francis wins. Either way, I am all for seeing St. Francis versus Cathedral Catholic in the finals. And it's going to be quite in the state finals on Saturday. And the state finals will be held at Santiago Canyon College in Orange. And that's basically the home of all things CIF state volleyball. So there's that right there. But that's basically going to do it for some high school volleyball talk. We're going to take ourselves a quick little break, give my voice a little bit of time to rest. I promise you all, I will mute. I forgot to mute my intro. I'm going to say that right now, and I feel really, 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 really silly. So if you heard some background noise in the back, I do apologize. And just for my incompetence of not muting at the beginning of the show, I have to give myself the Dum Dum of the Week award, even though this isn't the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. So, for my incompetence for not muting early on, I am the early Dum Dum of the Week award recipient.
You are so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
Yeah, I'm sorry, y'all. I'll be better next time. But when we come back, we've got NCAA Women's Volleyball Week 12 to recap and Week 13 to preview. So you are listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports.
What is going on, everybody? My name is Harrison Glazer, and we're coming at you from the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. I cover the Jets, the Islanders, the Nets, and the Yankees.
This is Pierre Moss, and I cover the Mets, Knicks, Rangers, and the Giants.
Our show is live every Wednesday through Spreaker and a bunch of other ways to get our content. Again, we're the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. We talk about all those New York sports. It's a lot of fun. We get into all of it. Please tune in. Again, that's Wednesdays at 6 p.m.
And we look forward to having you guys right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hello, ladies and sinners. Hello, sports fans around the world. Hello, IE Sports family. This is Cale Henderson, the host of IE Vegas, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio. If you folks are interested in sports in the Vegas area, if you're wanting to have a blast for 1 hour, every Tuesday night from 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, this is a show built for the Vegas sports fans, where we feature the Las Vegas Raiders, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, the Las Vegas Aces, and the University of Las Vegas, Nevada Rebels. Hopefully, fingers crossed, MLB team coming soon. Either way, if you folks are looking to have a blast for 1 hour each and every week, tune in Tuesday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you folks are interested in Vegas sports news, go to our Twitter, at SinCities_IESR, and you can speak with me, the host, Cale Henderson, at Cale_Henderson on Twitter. At any time, be happy to reply. Always want to reach out to our fans. Again, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Sports fans, do you like teams that are tough, cities that are tougher, and fan bases that are passionate about their teams? How about teams that are historic and stadiums that are iconic? Then you belong in Chicago, and you need to check out Chi-Town Weekly. Join me, Adam Kernan, every week as we keep up with all things Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox. We'll cover them all, plus more. The Windy City is always buzzing, and we'll keep you up on all the big games and major stories. So tune in to Chi-Town Weekly every week right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Back with segment number 2 of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Definitely check out all of our amazing shows, such as the Show That Never Sleeps with Harrison Glazer and Pierre Moss. That airs every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific Time, 8 p.m. Eastern. Then we have Sin City Sports with Cale Henderson airing tomorrow, Tuesday, at 7 p.m. Pacific Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. And then every Monday we have Chi-Town Weekly with Adam Karp, which goes on 1 hour before this show practically every week. Definitely check out Adam. He does an excellent job with his show. He talks all things Chicago sports. Cale talks all things Las Vegas sports. And then Pierre and Harrison talk all things New York sports. Now let's get on to segment number 2, as we got to recap week number 12. So, in addition to my USC-Stanford match that I attended, I didn't attend any other matches. I got y'all. But there were a lot of other reverse sweeps. So, jumping over to Thursday, we had Oregon reverse sweeping Colorado. Now, Colorado is a very solid team. They needed a little bit of a statement win, and they were looking to knock Oregon off their high horse. Unfortunately, Oregon wasn't falling off no high horse, as they reverse swept Colorado. Colorado was dominating the first 2 sets, and then the third set, they were able to come back and win that one. Well, not like come back, but hold off Colorado in that third set. Then the fourth set, Colorado was up 10 points. 10 points. And we're probably all thinking, okay, Colorado has got this one. Oregon's going to fall, and Oregon is basically going to lose. Nope. Colorado wound up whiffing a 10-point lead as Oregon forced a 5th set. And then in that 5th set, Oregon managed to run past Colorado in the 5th set. And despite Colorado making it a little close, Oregon wound up reverse sweeping them. But that wasn't the only reverse sweep that happened. We also got UCLA reverse sweeping Cal, as I feel bad for Cal. Cal has not had a whole lot of good luck when it comes to the Pac-12. And unfortunately, it's been a while since they've last won a Pac-12 game. Ever since the COVID year where they beat Stanford, which Stanford at that time, they had a bunch of roster issues in terms of COVID as well. But poor Cal. This is the second time that happened. They got reverse swept. They went up 2-0 on UCLA. Keep in mind they were at Pauley Pavilion. Then UCLA, they started playing better as Charity Looper was doing her thing. Francesca Alupe was doing her thing as well. Elon McCall was doing her thing. Basically, UCLA was playing so much better in the third and fourth set. Fifth set, it was tight, but then UCLA started pulling away after the halfway mark, and then that's how UCLA avoided getting reverse swept. I can only imagine UCLA Twitter if UCLA lost to Cal. It would have gone bananas. And then also on Friday, we had yet another reverse sweep, as we had, coming to the ACC, we had Louisville reverse sweeping Georgia Tech. Now, it's been a while since Georgia Tech has beaten Louisville. Their last time Louisville lost to Georgia Tech was 2016, back when Louisville had their first losing season. It looked as if Louisville was kind of on the ropes, and I don't think they had Anna DeBeer. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have been down 0-2. But then, just like the other matches, Louisville started playing better, and Claire Chaussee is just a force to be reckoned with. Claire Chaussee and Julia Bergman, they're both amazing players, and Julia probably has the best chance of being the AVCA Player of the Year, barring any setbacks. She's probably going to be ACC Player of the Year. I mean, her or Chaussee will be ACC Player of the Year. I just think that both of those players are really amazing, and it's just quite astounding. And you also have to look at Pitt and its players, like Courtney Bizzario. She has a good chance at being Player of the Year. It's just really amazing. So, more on the ACC a little bit later, but it was an impressive reverse sweep for Louisville. I feel horrible for Georgia Tech just because that was their best chance at upsetting them. And their last win over Louisville, like I said, it was on November 18th, 2016. It had nearly been 6 full years since they last beat Louisville. And unfortunately, they let the win slip through their fingers. The third set was kind of in a little bit of a delay because I think there was like moppings of the floor, which kind of slowed everything down. And then after that, Louisville caught their second win, and they eventually flew off with the reverse sweep. So, unfortunately, Georgia Tech was unable to get that big, huge breakout win, but Tech is still up there. Like, Tech is still going to be good, but they can only go as far as Julia Bergman takes them. Like, if Julia Bergman is going to go off every night, then there's no doubt Georgia Tech is going to make it at least to the Sweet 16, if not the Elite 8. But can Georgia Tech take down the Texases, the Nebraskas, the Wisconsins, the Ohio States, heck, San Diego? Well, it all depends on what San Diego does. And, I mean, San Diego's just mowing down teams like nobody's business. But overall, that's basically my little gist of Georgia Tech. Now let's jump to my team of the week. So my team of the week this week for week 12 is Ohio State. Now, I already gave Ohio State the honor just because in week 3 when they wound up pulling off 2 big victories. But Ohio State gets this honor just because they beat Purdue on Thursday, which I thought was impressive. And then they beat Nebraska on Sunday, which was very, very impressive. Now, keep in mind, Ohio State lost to Nebraska the first time around in 5 sets, which, ironically enough, was the last time there was an AVP tournament. But this time, Ohio State came up big in Columbus, as the win not only was the first of 3 upsets we had this past week, but it really helped Ohio State's chances of winning the Big Ten, as Ohio State is nearing the end of its season, as everyone's nearing the end of their regular season. As Ohio State, they still have to play Wisconsin, which that basically could be the Big Ten championship right there. But in the win over Nebraska, Ohio State was led by Emily Londot, who had 23 kills. She had a hitting percentage of .353, and she had 21 digs. She had a 20-20 night. That is huge right there. Gabby Gonzalez had 18 kills and 20 digs, which was also big time right there. Janasia Moore came up big as she had 12 kills. In terms of digs, they were led by Kylie Murr, who I call the human shovel, as she had 24 digs. Sarah Sue Morbitzer added 16 digs, and Mac Pedraza chipped in 11 digs, as she had 55 assists and 3 kills of her own. As a team, Ohio State, get this, Ohio State had a whopping 101 digs. Absolutely astounding. And they held Nebraska to only 168. And Ohio State also had 9 blocks. And they held Nebraska to only 6 blocks. But Nebraska did have 86 digs as well. But overall, Ohio State was just incredible. And they could have nearly swept Nebraska. Unfortunately, that third set kind of slipped away from them, though they kind of had to basically come back late in that third set to take it to deuce, and then basically Nebraska just held them off, and they won a challenge. And we also got to see Angry John Cook, but I digress. So Nebraska was led by Allie Batenhorst. She had 15 kills, while Maddie Kubik had 14 kills, and Whitney Lorenstein added 12 kills. Like I said, as a team, Nebraska hit 168, but that's because Ohio State had 101 digs. Like, this is one of the few times you will see a team from the Big Ten have 100 or so digs. Because remember, Emily Eamon one time said that we only get to see like 1, 2, maybe 4 teams with like 100 plus digs. Like, that was kind of the case last year when there was a team with 100 plus digs. But I digress on that. Nebraska in the dig department was led by Lexi Rodriguez, who had 24 digs. Nicklin Hames added 21 digs. Kenzie Knuckles chipped in 11 digs. And Maddie Kubik had 10 digs. It looks like Hames kind of is the full-on setter, unless, of course, Lexi... I feel Nebraska only went with the 5-1 as opposed to 6-2, but overall, I don't think this is a bad loss for Nebraska. Their chances of winning the Big Ten did get smaller, but they are going to host. They are going to be a top 8 seed, and I still think this Nebraska team is not going to be anything to be trifled with. I think this loss could be the straw that stirs their drink. But as for why I picked Ohio State as my team of the week, those are two quality wins, especially playing Purdue at Purdue. It is not easy to beat Purdue at West Lafayette, but they were able to do so, and it certainly was not easy beating Nebraska, but Ohio State did that, and now they are a few wins away from possibly being Big Ten Conference champions. Everyone was on the hype train when it came to Ohio State winning the Big Ten this year. And then also, you got to remember that Ohio State played a very tough schedule. They played a bunch of I think all of their all of their non-conference games were NCAA tournament teams. And it was just quite great. It was great that Jen Flynn Oldenburg scheduled those tough opponents just because it helped them get ready for the Big Ten. And if you're not ready for the Big Ten, it's going to be ready for you, and it's going to chew you up and spit you out. And that's what I respect about Ohio State women's volleyball. That's why they're my team of the week. The honorable mentions go out to Towson, which wound up being Hofstra twice, which Towson wound up winning the 2CA regular season championship as they are the number 1 seed in their conference tournament. And then the other honorable mention goes to TCU for upsetting Baylor this past Saturday, then number 10 Baylor. More on that later. So we had other upsets that happened, as we also had Arizona upsetting Washington. And my goodness, Arizona, what is it with the Arizona schools getting the better of Washington? Like, I understand Washington does not have Maddie Ensley. She is out for the entirety of the season, but I'm just so surprised that Washington wound up losing this one. Like, especially since they kind of need all the wins that they can get. I get it. It was in Arizona. I totally get it. However, it's like you can't afford too many losses. Well, for starters, Washington is not going to host. They're not going to win the Pac-12, and they're not going to be a top 16 seed, let alone host the remainder of the tournament or be a top 8. But overall, this one was quite the stunner. I was very flabbergasted when I saw Arizona beating Washington. So I forgot to mention. No, I basically mentioned it in the Nebraska-Wisconsin match, or Nebraska-Ohio State matchup. Ohio State won the first 2 sets. They won the first set 31-29. Won the second set a little more comfortably. Nebraska won the third set in very tight fashion. And then, I'm not going to really say this to be mean, but Ohio State blew the doors off of Nebraska in that fourth set. Now, obviously, like I said, Ohio State is a very good team, but I was a little flabbergasted to see Nebraska just losing by 9 to Ohio State. But like I said, Ohio State is the real deal. That's why you schedule tough opponents. Back to Washington, Arizona. So Washington took the first set 25-20. Second set, Arizona surprised everybody. They never trailed, though there were 4 ties. They wound up winning 25-18. Third set, Washington dominated Arizona. They blew the doors off them in that one, 25-12. But then the fourth and fifth set, well, I guess I should say the fourth set, Arizona won that one, 25-19. They never trailed. And then in the fifth set, Arizona never trailed that, and they wound up winning it 15-10. And keep in mind, Arizona is the third worst team in the Pac-12 conference ahead of Oregon State and Cal. That's not a good loss right there. That's a bad loss for Washington. Like I said, I understand Maddie Ensley is out for the year, and that kind of changes the dynamic of Washington. But you need all the wins you can get, just because you don't want to be in a regional which puts you in a bad situation where you're not ready to take down said team. I mean, everyone thought that Washington was gonna be ready for Texas, but little did they know, you don't mess with Texas. Texas messes with you. Arizona was led by Sophia Maldonado Diaz, who had 18 kills. She hit 310. She was their only double-digit kill leader, as Arizona hit 216. In terms of digs, Arizona got outdug by 1, as they were led by Camille Hayapo, who had 25 digs. She was their only double-digit dig leader. Something that Arizona did excel in, they had 16 blocks compared to Washington's 11. And they got out-aced, and they had more service errors, so I'm just wondering, how did Washington lose this one? Washington was led by Claire Hoffman, who had 15 kills, while Maren Grote chipped in 14 kills. Shannon Crenshaw added 10 kills, as Washington, as a team, they only hit 182, as Hoffman had 10 hitting errors, not good, and then Crenshaw had a 114 hitting percentage. Grote was probably the most efficient hitter, as she only had 1 hitting error, and she hit 542. Good for her. In terms of the dig department, Washington was led by Lauren Bays, who had 17 digs. LMA Powell had 14 digs to go along with her 37 assists and 2 kills. And then Crenshaw had 10 digs, but it was not enough. Fortunately for Washington, they bounced back against Arizona State, because if they lost that one, they would not be ranked. I can tell you that much right now. So that was on Friday. On Saturday, like I mentioned, we had TCU upsetting then number 10 Baylor, as TCU won the first set 25-23. Second set, Baylor kind of got a little revenge, as they wound up winning the second set 27-25. Also to keep in mind, TCU and Baylor had 13 ties, but only 4 lead changes. So TCU was in a battle for the most part against Baylor, but they came out on top. But it was vice versa in the second set, though there were only 5 ties in that second set. The third set, TCU wound up winning 25-20, as there were 11 ties, 6 lead changes. So TCU literally had to, I wouldn't say pull away, but they had to, get some separation in the second half of the set. Then the fourth set, this set was ugly. TCU blew the doors off of Baylor in that fourth set, 25-10. I've never seen Baylor get dominated like that against a team not named Texas or anyone else. But 25-10, yikes. That's just, I wouldn't say ugly, but it's just mind-blowing. Something I do need to make note of is that TCU actually is in 4th place in the Big 12. That said, they don't really have too many wins to stand out against. So there's that right there. But the win for TCU does hurt Baylor's chances, because now Baylor is 2 games back of Texas, because Texas wound up winning its game. So much like Iowa State losing to Kansas State, that was kind of the case with TCU beating Baylor. So, yeah, ouch, Baylor. The fact that you were top 10 wound up seeing you lose to TCU. TCU, man. Ow. TCU was led by Audrey Knowles, who had 22 kills. She hit 364, which was darn right impressive. Then Julia Adams had 10 kills, while Jalen Gibbons had 9 kills, and Zoe Hall had 8 kills. As a team, TCU hit 289, which was very impressive. And in set 4, Baylor hit 333, while holding Baylor to a negative 111 hitting percentage in that fourth set. And get this, Baylor in that fourth set, they had 10 hitting errors to 6 kills. Yuck. That's not where it ends, though. It gets a whole lot worse. Baylor failed to record a service ace. Yuck. They had 12 service errors. Yuck. TCU aced them 3 times, which wasn't as bad. But here's where the straw broke the camel's back. Baylor had a whopping 6 blocks as a team. No solo blocks. As for TCU, they had a whopping 13 blocks. That right there, that's not going to help you win games. If you're getting out-blocked by the opposing team, that's not going to help you. TCU also outdug Baylor, but only by 3, as Callie Williams led them with 11 digs, and then Mackenzie Nichols had 10 digs. Audrey Knowles chipped in 9 digs. As for Baylor, they were led by Lauren Harrison, as she had 13 kills. Elise McGee added 10 kills, and then Allie Setch chipped in 9 kills. As a team, Baylor hit 160. That's not another way you cannot win games. You can't win matches by just having a hitting percentage of 160. You can't get outblocked 13-6. You can't not record a service ace. I mean, it's tough to record service aces just because you can't just say, okay, you got to make your serves. Like Tyler Hildebrand basically said that, and it's not that easy. You can't just say, make your serves. It just doesn't work like that in Magic. But you can always serve aggressively, but you can't serve too aggressively. In terms of digs, Avery Carlson led them in that department with 13 to go along with her 40 assists. And then Lauren Briseno added 10 digs as well. Overall, it was just one of those games for Baylor. And unfortunately, it was just not meant to be, sadly. So that is pretty much that for week 13. Before I go on to my stat stuffers and my notable number nuggets, I unfortunately found out some bad news. And I found out today officially, but while I was at the AVP Beach Tournament, I talked with Maddie Shields about how Pepperdine started off doing really good. Remember, they had those wins over Minnesota, Baylor, and Washington, but then they kind of slipped all the way down as they lost to teams like San Francisco, LMU, and Gonzaga. They lost to LMU as well this past weekend. And you all know that Rachel Ahrens was not on the stat sheet. I was wondering, well, what happened with her? I already told y'all that some of the members on the men's volleyball team told me that she was on IR, which means injured reserve. And then it was clearly evident that Pepperdine was struggling without her. But then I found out from Maddie Shields, she told me, and she didn't mean to spill the beans on this, she told me that she quit, and I'm like, no way. I'm like, that's mind-blowing. And then I eventually found out on the Pepperdine women's volleyball roster, she wasn't on there. So then I do some more digging, and 3 days ago, unfortunately, Rachel Ahrens basically said goodbye to the sport she loved, that she's been playing ever since she was 7 years old. And it really sucks, because Rachel Ahrens is such a very great player, and she obviously won what was best for Pepperdine, but she made the wise decision of putting her mental health ahead of herself, which I definitely think is super wise. And Marshawn Lynch said it best. You got to take care of y'all mentals, because if you can't take care of y'all mentals, you can't take care of y'all bread and y'all chickens, and you got to take care of y'all bodies. I'm going to make this very short. Rachel posted this very long message. She said, "Recently I said goodbye to the sport that's been with me since I was 7 years old. I never thought my career would end this abruptly, but I had to make this decision for my health. I have struggled with mental health ever since my freshman year of college. Within the past 2 years, I've been at my worst. I started losing who I was and felt disconnected from everything in my life. This affected my love for volleyball and confidence in myself as a player/person. When I got onto the court, every flaw and error was repeated over and over in my mind. I would think one thing and it just continued to spiral. I have never felt like this until the start of our 2022 season, and I really didn't know how to handle it. It led me to high levels of burnout, lack of motivation, and disappointment in myself for my inability to be a consistent teammate for others." And then she also goes on to saying that mental health affects everyone in a different way. And she said the best decision for herself and for the team was to step away from the sport. She didn't want to quit, however, because she will never quit on herself. But she chose to take a step in the right direction that would leave her to loving and feeling like herself again. And I totally understand this. I really feel horrible for her, as I think it was Lauren Dooley who stepped away from Florida after she basically said she's stepping away because of mental health reasons. And that's totally understandable. And all the power to Rachel. I really felt bad for her, and I understand her situation. I don't fully understand her situation, but I've never been in that situation before, but sometimes that's just how it is. Like, it's tough to be a college athlete just because you basically have to go to practice, and then you have to try to live a social life, and then you've got your studies, and then you've got game film, then you've got game day. You don't have a whole lot of time for this, and I totally would understand on how she would be burnt out. Because mental health is real, y'all. Like Marshawn Lynch tried to tell y'all, but I digress. So it really is heartbreaking to see Rachel Aaron step away, but I wish her nothing but the best going forward. She's a fantastic person, and the volleyball world is going to miss her. Pepperdine definitely misses her, but overall, it's her life. She needs to do what she wants to do. She needs to do her thing, and I raise my bottle of water to you, Rachel. So that is that for that little sad little bit of news. Okay, I wouldn't call it sad, but it's unfortunate. I mean, Pepperdine, they just don't look like the same team. But overall, they should get into the NCAA tournament. I mean, this week they've got some big-time matchups, but I'll get into those in a little bit. But Rachel Aaron, thank you for letting me interview you last season when you had that Pepperdine, when you were at the Pepperdine Long Beach State scrimmage, and I wish you nothing but the best going forward. So that's that for that little bit of news right there. Now let's go into the stat stuffers / number nuggets. So Kendall Kipp of Stanford surpassed 1,000 kills in Stanford's win over USC this past Wednesday. So in addition to her ability of taking over the game, she wound up making history for herself. And everyone talks about Julia Bergman or Logan Eggleston in the Player of the Year conversation. What about Kendall Kipp? She doesn't have the numbers like Eggleston or Bergman or Chaussee, but she has everything else. She has the perfect package. She's tall, she gets good blocks, and then she has that really good jump float serve. She is just a force to be reckoned with. And I remember her days back at Corona Del Mar. She would just punish teams that would get in her way. So the next few number crunchers are basically from Creighton. So we'll start with Keely Davis of Creighton. She set a new high in service aces as she actually broke the previous record of service aces with 145, and now she surpassed that as she has 146 service aces in counting for Creighton, which is incredible. So good job to Keely Davis on setting the new team high overall in terms of service aces. And in that same match, Jayla Zimmerman, who hasn't played a whole lot of this season, because remember, she got hurt last year, and then I think it was a season-ending injury. I don't know what injury it was. Maybe it was like ACL or something. But it took her a while to get back on the court, and then she was able to get back on the court, and she eventually got her 1,000th kill, which is incredible. I'm so happy for her. I felt heartbroken when I found out that she hasn't been able to play, let alone she missed out on a majority of the season, let alone the NCAA tournament. Like, Creighton could have definitely used her last season. And also in that match altogether, Creighton broke the record for number of consecutive sets won, as they've now won 26 in counting. So that's quite incredible for Creighton. Now, this number right here, well, actually, no. Before I get into that number, I got to get into another stat that I found out of. And this one actually comes from out from the West Coast, as they actually broke a record of their own, as they've won 21 in a row, and they have 13 straight sweeps. That's just how incredible it is. And in addition, they had a perfect 14-0 home record. Now, I don't know if that's been done in the past, but But overall, San Diego just is continuing to have their most historic season. 21 wins in a row? My goodness. And 13 straight sweeps. Now, granted, a majority of San Diego's opponents aren't on their level. I think the only truly impressive win that San Diego has from those 13 straight sweeps is BYU. Other than that, San Diego has just beaten up on kind of the lower teams, but I digress. Now for the final impressive tidbit / number nugget. So, get this. Going back to Nebraska or the Midwest, Nebraska on Friday, get this, they surpassed, you also got to remember, Nebraska is a volleyball school, big-time volleyball school. They've also got some other good athletics as well, but Nebraska surpassed not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 10, not 20, not 30, not even 100, but 300 consecutive sellout crowds. I am not kidding you. Nebraska has had 300 consecutive sellout home crowds. Incredible. That is amazing. That's just, absolutely amazing. Absolutely incredible. 300 sellout crowds. That's just history right there. Heaven knows they'll probably get to 400, but time will tell. But hats off to Nebraska. 300 sellout crowds in women's volleyball. Hat is off to them. So that's going to basically do it for my numbers and nuggets and tidbits and stat stuffers. Now let's jump on in to the AVCA Top 25 for this week. So the Top 25 consists of 25 through 21, Washington State at 25, UCF at 24, Houston at 23, Rice at 22, and Washington at 21. 20 through 16 consists of Western Kentucky at 20, Purdue at 19, Kentucky at 18, BYU at 17, and Marquette at 16. 15 through 11 consists of Baylor at 15, Penn State at 14, Georgia Tech at 13, Oregon at 12, and Creighton at 11. 10 through 6 consists of Florida at 10, Minnesota at 9, Stanford at 8, Pitt at 7, and Nebraska at 6. 5 through 1 consists of Ohio State at 5, Louisville at 4, Wisconsin at 3, San Diego at 2, and your still number 1 team in the AVCA Division I Coaches Poll Women's Volleyball is Texas. So, something else I mentioned, and this isn't really an upset, Western Kentucky beat Rice in 5. Now, those teams are practically evenly matched with one another. There's not too much separation. But Western Kentucky has won 5 in a row over the Owls, as those Hilltoppers continue to top those Owls. But I have a feeling we're going to be seeing them in their conference tournament, and I would not be surprised if those two played against one another in that conference tournament. And then it looks like Houston and UCF are on pace to face one another in their conference in the AAC. And then, like I said, Rice and Western Kentucky Conference USA final should be between those two. And then I imagine Marquette and Creighton will face one another in the Big East Conference. But more on that later. That's actually a perfect segue to go into the final topic and for the final thing to discuss, and that is the NCAA Women's Volleyball Week 13 matchups to watch for. So we'll start with the sneaky good matchups. So the first sneaky good matchup is Kansas at number 1 Texas. So we all got to remember all the way back in September that Kansas nearly beat number 1 Texas, but unfortunately they wound up getting reverse swept. This time Texas is the home team, and Texas, it's their Big 12 conference to lose. If they get past this one, they should have the green light after. If they get past this week, they have the green light pretty much the entirety of next week and beyond. I should also mention that TCU, sadly, I forgot to mention that last week, TCU had to forfeit against Texas, which is unfortunate. I don't know the whereabouts, but it's sad that that TCU had to forfeit. Also in the Big 12, we have Iowa State taking on number 15 Baylor. So both of these teams have one thing in common. Their Big 12 hopes are pretty much down the toilet, unless, of course, Unless, of course, they somehow manage to see Texas crumble. And if that were to happen, it would be pretty funny. But it wouldn't be for Texas fans, that's for sure. It would be quite disgusting, as Iowa State, they're in the worst situation because they're 9-4, and remember, they lost twice to Kansas State, and then they just lost recently last week to Texas. So Iowa State is pretty much way too far back to see them winning the Big 12. Like, their chances of winning the Big 12 got punched when Kansas State beat them. Now, if Baylor wins, then they set up a matchup against Texas, which could determine on if they'll be sharing the Big 12 championship, or if Texas will be pretty much winning it outright. Jumping over to the SEC, we have Tennessee at number 18, Kentucky, as a sneaky good matchup. So this is another rivalry game. So for Tennessee and Kentucky, it's always a tough rivalry between these two teams. Kentucky has gotten the better of the Vols, but you never want to overlook, because Kentucky this weekend, they have Florida. They're at Florida, and they cannot overlook Tennessee. Tennessee is vastly underrated, and they're still looking for that big breakout win. And for me, if Kentucky overlooks Tennessee and they wind up losing, that's going to make their chances of winning the SEC a whole lot tougher, because they're already, 1.5 games back of Florida in the standings. But overall, I really think that Kentucky should handle this one. They're a half game back of Florida, because they've got 3 games while Florida just has the 2 this week. But overall, for Kentucky, they have to win today or they have to win against Tennessee on Wednesday, because if they do, then the matchups between Florida are basically all or nothing for who wins the SEC, because there are only 2 weeks in the regular season, and I will be interested to see how Kentucky does, because their final game of the season is against South Carolina, which is not going to be an easy opponent. Meanwhile, for Florida, they have Ole Miss, which they're kind of in the middle of the pack, while South Carolina is nearing the bottom of the pack. But like we learned last year, South Carolina is not to be underestimated, because Kentucky lost to them. Continuing on with the sneaky good matches, we've got number 2 San Diego at receiving votes LMU. This would be a big win for LMU, or Loyola Marymount, as they're still looking for that big breakout win. If they win this one, they're in the NCAA tournament, no doubt. Why? Because being the number 2 team is not anything easy. Here's my thing. I feel San Diego struggles at LMU. I remember a couple seasons ago, I think it was the COVID season, they wound up losing to LMU, and that's pretty much what derailed them altogether. Just because it's so tough to beat LMU at their place. And LMU has a lot of momentum just because they just beat Pepperdine a second time. And that's always a big, great feeling, beating your crosstown rival. In addition, you got to remember, LMU took San Diego to 5. So I would not be surprised if LMU made it tough on San Diego. Keep an eye on San Diego, LMU right there. San Diego is going to be tested this week, and you're about to see why later on in this segment. Speaking of which, that's a perfect segue to go into the next matchup. Number 2, San Diego at receiving votes Pepperdine. So Pepperdine, I basically talked about them. They're just not the same without Rachel Aarons. But they still have other good players like Emma Ammerman, Meg Brown, Grace Chillingworth. Isabella Zayala is a great floor general. And then Trinity Stanger and the other... I'm blanking on number 19's name. I think it's like Riley Patterson. I'm honestly blanking on it, but overall, Pepperdine still has some tough guns. But I feel this is going to be a tougher matchup than expected. But Pepperdine did take a set off of what's their face, whatchamacallit, San Diego the first go around. But that was back when West Coast Conference was very young, and it wasn't as familiarized as it is now. So, right, yeah, it is Riley Patterson. I'm proud of myself for knowing that, considering it's been a while since I've seen a Pepperdine game. But overall for Pepperdine, if they win this matchup, they're without a doubt in the tournament. I understand they have some hideous losses to San Francisco and then Gonzaga. But remember, they still beat Washington, Baylor, and Minnesota. Those are not easy teams to beat. I mean, Minnesota is still kind of in contention in the Big 12. Washington, it's not looking all that great in terms of good wins, considering Washington just lost to Arizona, and they also lost to Arizona State. And then for Baylor, it's still a decent win, but that TCU loss kind of says otherwise. This kind of makes me wonder, does the West Coast Conference get 4 teams in the NCAA tournament? Just because it's so difficult. You can't say no to beating Minnesota, because beating Minnesota at Minnesota is just so difficult. And Pepperdine is pretty much in firm control of 4th place, barring San Francisco doesn't run the table and Pepperdine doesn't lose out. But I don't see Pepperdine getting anywhere close to Loyola Marymount, as they're 3 games back of the whatchamacallits, the of LMU. I'm blanking on their mascot. How am I blanking on their mascot? Anyway, I just think that Pepperdine San Diego is going to be a good little matchup as the Lions. LMU is known as the Lions. How did I forget that? So, yeah, I think this is also going to help Pepperdine's strength of schedule, or their RPI. I really think that this is going to be an important matchup, and especially if Pepperdine does manage to take another set off of San Diego. We'll see, though. Still remains to be seen. And then we're going to try to cruise past some of the others. We have, also on Saturday, we have number 17 BYU at LMU. Okay, it's another scenario where LMU needs a big-time statement win. They do have that potential. Again, Loyola Marymount has the potential, and they're 12-3 in conference, and they're 16-7. Their only problem is their best win is against UCLA, which is not doing great this year, and I'll be surprised if UCLA manages to make the NCAA tournament. Like, if that happens, then yikes. But overall, for LMU, if they beat BYU, which is possible, then that definitely solidifies them into the NCAA tournament. But it could also boil down to the question, if BYU loses, or they lose another bad loss, like if they lose to Pepperdine and LMU, does that derail their hopes at making the NCAA tournament? Just because LMU's losses in conference are to San Francisco, which was surging at the time, and then obviously San Diego and BYU, which are not bad losses. But overall, for LMU, this is their week to prove themselves. If they could at least make it competitive against BYU and San Diego, then they're deserving of the NCAA tournament. And then the last sneaky good matchup to watch for is USC, receiving votes USC at number 12, Oregon. So if we all remember past matchups, USC beat Oregon in 4 at the Galen Center. That is USC's biggest win under their new head coach. That's the good thing. The bad thing in it is, however, they have to play Oregon at Oregon, and Oregon has not lost a game at Matthew Knight Arena. So if USC is thinking that this is going to be an easy matchup, they're dead wrong. What's their face? Skylar Fields is back for USC, as she basically had to help USC beat Cal in 5. Ugh. I forgot to mention Cal, but more on that later. But the fact that USC had to go 5 with Cal, that just feels so unclean. It just feels disgusting. I can only imagine what would have happened if USC didn't have Skylar Fields. That could have been a nightmare for them losing to Cal. Oof. Anyway, but I don't know if USC can win this one. If USC plays their game, if they actually play smart, if they serve and pass tough, if they limit Mimi Collier and Brooke Nunaviller, they might have a shot. But they're all going to need to be on point, just because Oregon is a darn good team, and Oregon has aspirations of finishing maybe in the top 8. I don't think they're going to finish top 8. I don't think they're going to be a number 8 seed, but that still remains to be seen when it comes to the committee come Selection Day. So that's all the sneaky good matchups. The notable matchups, we'll start off on Thursday. Number 17, BYU at Pepperdine. Remember, so Pepperdine, this is a big week for Pepperdine. They have 2 games at home. They're facing 2 ranked teams. This is where you really miss Rachel Ahrens. But, again, she's basically living her life and she's happy. They got to move on from that. They have to realize that they have other players on their team that could step up. They have the Emma Emmermans, the Grace Chillingworths, the Meg Browns. This is a good team. I really think Pepperdine is a very solid team. My thing is can they beat another ranked opponent without Rachel Ahrens? I really think they do have that potential. I really think they can win on Thursday more so than Saturday, but there is no shame of losing to San Diego, especially since they've won 21 in a row and they've had 13 sweeps. Also, in terms of the notable matchups on Saturday, we have number 3 Wisconsin at number 14 Penn State. This is another big time. This is a big time matchup in the Big Ten right here. So Wisconsin has 3 matches remaining. They have 4 matches remaining. I think they have Rutgers this week, and then after they play Rutgers, their last 3 games are going to be tough. They've got Penn State, and I think next week they have Ohio State at home, and then they have Nebraska at Nebraska. But for Wisconsin, Saturday starts the gauntlet for them. They beat Penn State the first time in 3 sets without Anna Smrek. Now can they do it again? It's going to be quite interesting to see if Wisconsin can pull it off. Also on Saturday, we have up east, number 11 Creighton at number 16 Marquette. So the first time around, Creighton had to reverse sweep their way to victory against Marquette. Now this time, Marquette is at home. I'm pretty sure we'll see these 2 teams in the Big East Conference Championship, unless, of course, St. John's or UConn upsets both these teams. But for these 2 teams, it's basically a rematch between these 2. I feel Creighton has the firepower, especially with Jayla Zimmerman back. But you can't overlook Marquette. Marquette does have some darn good players on their team. I think Marquette is going to make this a battle. And then also, in terms of the notables closing out, we have on Sunday, number 19 Purdue at number 6 Nebraska. So if Nebraska is thinking that Purdue is going to get trampled like they did the first time around, they're sadly mistaken. I don't think Nebraska should be overlooking anybody, especially since they had to go 5 with Northwestern. They wound up losing that one, but Northwestern lost their setter, which if she did not get hurt, I feel it just was a whole momentum changer. I'm not trying to say that Nebraska didn't deserve to win. I just think that Northwestern losing their setter was just bad. But for Nebraska, they just can't overlook Purdue. Purdue has a young team, but they have a talented team. I really think that Purdue, the second time around, could give Nebraska a run for their money. But it's so tough to win in Lincoln. It's so tough to win at the Bob. It really just is. Jumping over to the definitely noteworthy matchups, and this is probably my match of the week. Number 7 Pitt at number 4 Louisville. So here's the big test. If Pitt wins, they're pretty much on the fast track to finishing first place in the ACC. If Louisville wins, then they pretty much are on the verge. They're pretty much tied with Pitt for first place in the ACC, and they pretty much solidify themselves I wouldn't say solidify themselves, but they get it closer and closer to being that top 4 seed, which would be very important. I don't know the whereabouts of Anna DeBeer. I don't know if she's back from her injury. I hope she is, because if it is, then we're definitely going to get a barn burner from Louisville. This is going to be played at Louisville. It's not going to be played at the KFC Yum Center. It's going to be played at the other gymnasium that Louisville plays in, which isn't as big as the KFC Yum Center, but I digress. Also, definitely worth noting, I kind of accidentally put this one. I meant to put this one in the notables, but I guess this could be classified as definitely noteworthy. Number 9, Minnesota at number 14, Penn State. So Penn State is coming off of their big win over Purdue. I almost wanted to put them as my team of the week, but Ohio State's wins were just so much more convincing. If Penn State beats Minnesota, and they also beat Wisconsin, they're without a doubt my team of the week for Week 13. They have a young team. They have a first-year head coach, and they're exceeding expectations. I really think this Penn State team has potential. Do I think they can go deep into the NCAA tournament? That still remains to be seen. I still really like this Penn State team. I think Penn State has potential. They face a very tough Minnesota team, which I feel they could win that one, but it still remains to be seen. Kashana Williams is going to have the game of her life. But I think Kashana Williams has definitely adapted well at Penn State. She is competing really well just because she fears no other player. Like, when she steps onto the court, and she's told me this in the past, she does not care. She does not care who's on the other side of that court. All she cares about is getting that kill and carrying the team to victory. I accidentally put two of these matchups in the definitely noteworthy category when I should have put them in the notable category. But I might as well read this definitely noteworthy matchup also off. Number 15 Baylor at number 1 Texas. Depending on if Baylor gets past Iowa State, because remember, Baylor lost to Iowa State the first time around, they could set up a possible first place showdown or Big 12 championship game against Baylor, or against Texas. But you also got to remember, and I just totally blanked on this when I was putting my definitely noteworthy matches down. Baylor's 2 games back of Texas, and unless Texas loses again, which I don't see happening, Baylor at best will finish second. Like, I don't see how Texas loses the Big 12. Like, they'd have to lose to Kansas and Baylor this week, which I don't think is happening because both games are at Texas. So unless Texas has a massive road hangover, it's their championship to lose. And then the last definitely noteworthy matchup, this is 2 matches in one. Number 18 Kentucky at number 10 Florida. So here's the thing. Let's say Kentucky beats Tennessee. Don't care how many sets. Tennessee loses to Kentucky. Kentucky's tied for first with Florida going into the final matchup against, okay, not the final matchup, but this very important 2-match slate in Gainesville against Florida. This is where Florida loves to basically play. Like, the Swamp is Gainesville is basically their home court advantage. Not a whole lot of teams have had a whole lot of success at Gainesville. And you also got to remember that Florida has only lost twice this season. They lost to Georgia, which I still don't understand how they lost that one. And they also lost to South Carolina, which was also a little questionable. But again, South Carolina is that sneaky snake in the grass team. But for Kentucky, this is their chance to actually prove themselves. I gave them the Week 2 Team of the Week honor just because their wins over USC and Creighton were darn right impressive. But they haven't really had a true big-time win ever since. Now is their time to really prove themselves. And remember, I think they've won the SEC 4 straight times, so they also have that to defend as well. But this is a big, important week for both Florida and Kentucky. If Florida wins, they have the inside track, or they basically win. Whoever wins both matches, they basically have the SEC championship. Because even if a team loses their last 2 matches and then the other team wins out their last 2 matches, they still have said tiebreaker and higher seed over the other team. So that's how I envision it. But that's going to do it for all my matchups to watch for. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Set Point. It's time to drop the beat because I am nearing 2 hours. You feel me? Thank you everyone for tuning in to Set Point. I really do appreciate you all tuning in. If you listen live, I appreciate you. If you listen on playback, I appreciate you. If you listen at work, I appreciate you. If you listen at any time, any place, anywhere, I appreciate you. Shout out to the chat room on Spreaker, the live chat room. Larry B, Adam Karnick, and Mike Pat for popping in when they could. It really means a lot. For everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. Have a great rest of the week. Enjoy the volleyball action. Keep it locked, as you can follow me on Twitter, and I will see you all next week. Peace!